Well, good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing this morning? I hear a lot of laughter and clapping through the video announcements. That was awesome. Hey, real quick, there was one announcement that didn't make it into the video announcements today. I wanted to mention that we are having a beach baptism on August 24th. That's about a month from now. It's the fourth Sunday in August. August 24th, a beach baptism. Now, don't think of it as a beach baptism. Think of it as a church cookout at the beach that we're going to do baptisms at, because we really want everybody to come. It's not just for those that are getting baptized. We want all of you. Just think of it as a church cookout at the beach on August 24th. Everyone's invited, and if you want to get baptized, all the better. So there's a website you can sign up on, relatedchurch.com/baptism. So please plan on being there. It's at Little Island Park down in Sandbridge. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you're going to have, we're going to grill and have the whole cookout type of thing. So please plan on coming and celebrate those that have committed their life to Christ. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get into the real reason I'm up here today, and that is to talk to you about this second week of Right in the Eye. Now, if you weren't with us last week, let me catch you up real quick. Basically, we told a crazy story from the book of Judges, an insane story. If you haven't listened to it yet, or if you weren't here, you can always catch it online, realitychurch.com. There's a watch and listen. You can do it on your phone. You can subscribe to our podcast. There's like a million ways that you can still listen to every talk that we give in case you miss a Sunday. So if you happen to miss last Sunday, I strongly recommend that you catch it, because it's something you probably never have heard before, and those that were here can attest to that. So it's a crazy story from the book of Judges, and we're going to be continuing in that book today. Now, Judges, let me kind of give you a little context, happens to be a period of time in Israel's history. So the nation of Israel that started with Jacob, and God changed his name to Israel. He had 12 sons, which became the 12 tribes, and they got, sold into, they were slaves in Egypt, and then Moses came along, brought them across with all the cool plagues and the parting of the Red Sea, and then Joshua takes over when they go into the Promised Land, and they conquer everything. Well, right at the end of Joshua's life, he dies, and now the nation is kind of settled, but they still got some work to do. But for 330 years, they didn't have a king. They didn't have a great leader like Joshua, and they didn't have a king like they eventually got with Saul and with David. So for 330 years, this book called Judges covers that period of time. And the whole idea was that God had given them his law. God was supposed to be their king. That's the way it was done. God would be their king. He gave them instructions. He gave them the law. This is how you live life. This is how you worship me. This is how you keep yourself healthy. A whole bunch of different things that are not just about, giving sacrifices and stuff. There's a lot of practical things in there. And he said, if you live like this, I will bless you. I will fight your battles for you. You will be blessed among nations. People will look at you and be like, wow, we want to be like them. What do you guys got that we don't have? And that would point to the awesome God that God is. But unfortunately, the book of Judges is not a story of a nation that did awesome things and God was so happy with them. It's quite the opposite. In fact, they went through this thing that we're calling the crazy cycle. They would basically start with disobedience. They would disobey God, and then disaster would happen, because that inevitably happens when we disobey God. Disaster would happen, and then they'd be held captive or something, and then God would deliver them, because they'd finally call out to God, we're sorry, we're not going to do that anymore, and he would deliver them. But then soon after he delivered them, they would go right back into their old disobedient ways, and the cycle would repeat. And it would just happen over and over and over again. And at the very end of the book of Judges, there's this crazy story that we told last week. And at the very, very end, the author says something very interesting. He says that in those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. And the ending story is basically like, this is what happens when everyone does what is right in their own eyes instead of God's eyes. In fact, there's a proverb that it's in two separate places in Proverbs that says there's a way that seems right to a man, to a person. It seems right, but the end leads to death. So we have a way that seems right to us, but God says, no, that's not the way. But when we do what's right in our eyes, we found last week that chaos ensues. And we also learned that the book of Judges in a lot of ways reflects our individual lives, because really each one of us wants to do what we want, when we want, with who we want. But of course here in America we have a little asterisk and we say, as long as nobody gets hurt. As long as I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, with whoever I want to, as long as I'm not hurting anyone. But the truth is, and we found out last week, that is impossible. Because if you go around doing everything you want to do, and I go around doing everything I want to do, eventually we're going to hurt somebody. And especially, you're going to hurt you. You're going to hurt you. And guess what? You are someone. That's important. You are someone. You're going to hurt the people with you. You're going to hurt the people that care about you and the people that come after you. We talked about last week that if you think about it, how many of your personal problems can stem from the choices your parents made? Because they wanted to do what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it, and so on. And likewise, if we do the same, then those that come after us will suffer the same kind of consequences. So that's kind of what last week was. You should still listen to it. The story's pretty awesome. But last week we covered the end of Judges, and this week we're going to go backwards a little bit and cover the beginning of Judges. The very beginning of Judges. Now, the beginning of Judges is set right after they've just spent several, I think, years conquering the promised land. Joshua went in there. They had armies. They went around annihilating cities. And basically, God set it up. He fought for them so that they would be able to take over this land, and everything would already be built. Their crops are already planted and everything. So they would just basically get to move right in after they wiped everyone out. So imagine, if you will, and now Joshua's kind of on his deathbed. He's getting quite old, and it's just time for him to go. So imagine you're in the Israelite camp. And you're on a spiritual high. I mean, you just spent the last several months conquering nations easily, not really losing anybody. The kind of easy, the walls fall down in Jericho just because you marched around it a few times. Where God made the sun stand still and crazy stuff like that. I mean, you would be pumped up and God is awesome. He's great. And you're just on this great spiritual high. And now you've kind of come to this stopping point, this pause where Joshua's about to die. And of course, Joshua, being the wise leader that he is, he kind of gives them a pep talk, so to speak. He basically says, remember, before I go, everything's great now. You guys are all pumped up, but I'm going to give you a warning. Remember what God has done for you. And he kind of goes through and he lists all the, brought you out of Egypt, part of the Red Sea, all these cool things that God has done for you. And remember this and serve him. Serve him only. Don't copy these nations around you. And of course, they're like, we will, we're gonna serve God, we're gonna be on all that stuff. And then Joshua, kind of does this thing no, I don't think you will. And they're like, no, really, we're gonna serve God. We promise, we're really gonna do it. And he's like, are you sure? Are you sure you're gonna serve this God? And they're like, yes, we will serve God alone. And then they're cheering and stuff. And basically, Joshua's like, okay, good. Now, don't say I didn't warn you. And with that, Joshua dies, and everybody kind of goes home to their new land that they've conquered, that they've distributed, that you saw in the map that I showed last week. Now, you would think after all this amazing stuff, all these things they've gone through and the miracles they've seen, that they would have actually done what they said they were going to do and continue to love and serve God. But basically, the flowers hadn't even really started to wilt yet. On Joshua's grave, when we find in Judges chapter 2, it says, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight and served the images of Baal and Ashtaroth. They abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of Egypt. They went after other gods. They went after the other gods, worshiping the gods of the people around them, and they angered the Lord. Now, the Baal and the Ashtaroth, these were ancient gods who basically were thought to be fertility or kind of a fertility. So they were responsible for the growth of crops, for the birth of babies and all that kind of thing. But to worship them, to appease them, required there was a lot of sexual immorality, there was prostitution, there was torture, there was actually human sacrifice. They would sacrifice their babies to this god to try to appease him so they could have more babies. And so the Israelites, instead of wanting to follow God, the one who had done all these great things for them, they looked around and they wanted to be like the nations around them. They wanted the sacrifice. For some reason, they wanted that instead of the goodness that God had given them. It kind of makes you shake your head a little. It's like, why can't you see? It's like, when you have a football and you guys, of course, have the bird eye view, and that guy was open. Why didn't you throw it to him? It's a little harder when you're down on the field. But before you get all judgmental, let's bring this back to us. It's easy to look back at this ancient nation of Israel thousands of years ago, people that we don't really understand, and to think that that doesn't really apply to us. But remember that the story of Israel, in fact, you read the whole Old Testament, the story of Israel is kind of a story about us. It's a story about you as it applies to a nation, but the things they went through, we go through as individuals. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been to a church camp? Have you ever been to maybe a church retreat, or maybe some kind of a off-site conference where there was a motivational speaker and they kind of pumped you up, and when you left there, you actually wanted to start changing. You wanted to be better than you were before when you went, and you kind of make these promises to yourself, and you're like, not because you feel pressured into it, but just because you've been through an experience and you now see the world, you kind of have a new perspective on life, and you want to change things. Probably an experience like that for me was boot camp. Now, I know a lot of you guys and gals are military, so when I went through boot camp about 15 years ago, at the end of it, I was in the best shape of my life. I ran like a 10-minute mile and a half. I'm not going to tell you how much I weighed, but anyway, I was in the best shape of my life, and when I got out, I was like, I'm going to keep it off, and clearly I did, but for those of you that didn't anyway, this applies to you. But the truth is, what was really funny to me were the smokers, the boot camp smokers, because you can't smoke in boot camp. It's like 3 months long, and they can't smoke the whole time. And what do? Day one, they get out of boot camp, they start, they could have quit, they could have stopped, they could have never been addicted again, but of course, they jumped right into it. So really, it's not just Israel that did this kind of thing. We do the same things. We swear off we're going to do things. We get ourselves in a jam, and something happens, and we're like, I'm never going to do it again. I'm going to be good. I'm going to serve God. I'm going to keep being good. And, of course, then it only lasts for about a week or so, and we're right back where we started. So, after all that God had done for them, the Israelites did evil in the sight of the Lord, and this is God's response. In Judges 3:8 says, Then the Lord burned with anger against Israel, and he turned them over to King C.R. of A.N., and the Israelites served that guy for 8 years. So basically, God turned them over he let this other king capture them, and they served him for 8 years, and it wasn't fun. It wasn't like, we get to go serve this other king because he's really nice to us. It was bad. They worshiped the Baals and the Ashtaroths. It was torture. They were held captive. They were slaves. Basically, God was saying, so you don't want to follow me. You don't like me being your king. You want to serve these other kings. Well, you know what? I'm going to let you. But you're not going to like it. I'm going to give you what you want. But you're not going to like it. And here's why. Remember how we said from last week that this story of life, of your life, of my life, of all of us, it's not about us. The story of your life is not about you. The story of Judges and of all the books in the Bible are not about the characters in the Bible. It's a story that's ultimately about God. Because he made each of us, he designed each of us, and he also designed the world to work a certain way, and when we do it his way, it works the best because he designed everything. And ultimately, the reason why God wants us to follow his ways because he wants to give us the very best version of life that he has personally prepared for us. In fact, there's this great scripture, I know you've all heard of it, Jeremiah 29:11, where it says, God says, For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. This is the plan that God has for us, not indentured servitude or slavery. He wants the best for us. And another great thing about God is that he does not force it on us. I like to say that he's a gentleman. He doesn't force his will on us. He's a good parent. He doesn't grab us by the neck and make us do the things that he wants us to do. He lets us make our own choices, but he also lets us endure the consequences of our own choices. And in the case of Israel, they ended up being conquered by the very people that they were trying to copy. Think about that for a second. In the case here, they ended up being conquered by the very people that they were trying to copy. They simply traded one king, God, for another king. In trying to be free of the Creator King, they ended up simply trading him for another kind of king who was not quite as kind or benevolent as the Creator King. And this is exactly what we do. It's exactly what we do. Remember, the story of Israel is really a story of us. You know, what that looks like for us is we end up exercising what we think is freedom by kind of doing what we want, when we want to do it, with who we want to do it. We refuse to let God tell us what to do, and we end up becoming slaves to the very thing that was originally an expression of our freedom. We end up becoming slaves to the very thing that was originally an expression of our freedom. You start out doing whatever you want, when you want it, with whom you want it, and you find out one day later, or some days later, that now you can't stop. You can't stop. Now, instead of freedom, you're trapped, as the Israelites were, in the very thing that was an expression of your freedom. You want to be like this, and now it has you. You haven't gained freedom. You've simply traded the Creator King for another kind of king. Here's a little biblical insight for us. And this is something you're not going to like, because I don't like it either. But you and I were created to be ruled. I know that you don't like that. You and I were created to be ruled. We all want autonomy, right? We want to be our own boss. We want to be masters of our own destiny, answerable to no one, bound by nothing. But that doesn't truly exist. Can you predict and control when you're born, where you're born? Can you even predict and control when you die and where you die under normal circumstances? So who's really in control? You know, none of us are self-existent. We were not designed to just live unto ourselves. We were designed to be ruled. So when we walk away from the Creator King ruling us, we simply trade him for another kind of king ruling us, because we don't rule ourselves. And specifically, we trade God for a little king. The little kings, list some of them here: appetite. You know, the expression of our freedom to eat. And remember I said last week that we take our freedom to eat here quite seriously in America. Eventually you get to a place where now you can't stop. Like for me, I try to eat healthy, and it's really, really, really hard. I personally am held captive by the god of sugar. It's kind of funny, but I know many of us are. You find that you can't stop. Before it was, Mom didn't want me to do that, but I want to do it. I'm going to go to the grocery store, I earn my own money. I can buy candy if I want to. And then one day I found out I can't stop. Who's in control now? Not me. Insecurity. We choose to fit in instead of standing out. Ruled by our insecurity. Hate. How many of us have this? You've been wronged. But God calls us to forgive. But instead, we let the hatred of someone or something to rule us. Substance abuse, I don't have to talk about that. Lust, that's an obvious one. Greed, never have enough. Envy, comparing ourselves to others. The grass is always greener somewhere else. Now, pride. This one is a beast. This is something that has every one of us. You may look at the list and think, I don't have many of those, but we all have this one. Pride is a master. It's a dictator. It takes so many shapes, it's freaky. It's sneaky. It makes us do ridiculous things. It wrecks marriages. It destroys relationships. How many of us, because of our pride, can't submit to our spouse? Can't apologize when we know we're wrong? Can't let someone see our weaknesses when that's the very thing that would draw you closer. Pride is an evil little king. And the little kings, they tempt us with, I won't be told what to do. I won't be pure. I won't be honest. I won't forgive. I won't show weakness. I won't admit wrong. I won't say no for now. I won't be content with what I have. I won't give back to God. I won't end this relationship. I won't. No one's going to tell me what to do until one day you wake up and I won't becomes I can't. We've simply traded one king for another. We find ourselves trapped in the very thing that was originally an expression of our freedom. Have you ever noticed how it's always so much easier to say no to God than it is to say no to the things we substitute for God? Have you ever noticed that? It's easy to live life. God, I know this is wrong, but just close your eyes for a minute because I just got to do this. It's so easy to say no to God. But it's not. It's so hard to say no to the little kings that capture us, to say no to the appetite, to the pride, to the envy. If we find that we can't say no to them, but we can say no to God. You know why that is? It's because the little kings, they don't love you. They do not have your best interest in mind. They are not merciful. They will control you. And they will take away your freedom. And here's why. It's because by God's design, maximum freedom is only found under the canopy of God's authority. We were designed to be ruled, and maximum freedom only exists under the canopy of God's authority. This is why it's easy for us to say no to Him, because He lets us. He created us so that we would love Him, and true love only exists if there is a choice. So He gives us absolute free will to choose Him or to choose these little kings. But when we choose the little kings, which we all inevitably do, they don't let go so easy because they do not love us. So back to the Israelites for a second. They chose to serve the little kings instead of the Creator King. And they ended up getting sold into slavery for 8 years. And this wasn't the first and only time they did this. This happened multiple times throughout the book of Judges. And of course, at the end of the 8 years, they threw up their hands. God, we're sorry. We realize our wrongs. We're never going to do it again. And of course, God, because He's the God of mercy and love, He rescues them. Every time you actually submit your heart to God, He will come to your aid. He will rescue you. That's the kind of God He is, but He will also let you leave. But how much time was wasted chasing after this false freedom? How much pain and heartache could you have saved in your life if you had decided long ago to say yes to the Creator King and no to the little kings? How much pain, heartache, scars? I know I got a few of my own. If I'd have just said yes to the Creator King who only has my best interests at heart, in an attempt to be our own boss, in an attempt to simply do what I want, when I want, with whoever I want to, I don't like anyone telling me what to do. I end up getting trapped. I get captured by the little kings who do not love me. Because the inescapable fact is that the created thing cannot be its own master. We are the created things. We cannot be our own master. This is why it doesn't work. In fact, we are God's workmanship. He created us for His purposes, but we rebel against this idea because we have bought into the lies that God is somehow trying to keep something good from us. This is why we don't trust Him, because we've bought into the lie, the same lie that the serpent told Eve, is that God's holding out on you. He just wants you to be a slave to Him. He's got bad things planned for you. It's so much more fun over here. It's tasty over here. You're going to enjoy it. It's a mousetrap. And we buy it. And we fall prey to it. But in reality, the only thing that God is trying to keep you and me from, the only thing He's trying to keep from us is the same thing a parent tries to keep from their kid, to save us from the pain and heartache that inevitably comes from doing it my way. That's what God's trying to keep from you. It's not the fun. It's the pain and heartache. For I know the plans I have for you. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. plans to give you a hope and a future. That's what God has in store for us. He's not out to get you. Because here's the thing. God gets, as I said last week, he gets the greatest glory, which this is what this is all about, is for God to get the glory. He gets the greatest glory from the children that allow him to bless them because we trust him. He gets the greatest glory not by keeping us suppressed, not by knocking us around, not by making us feel, but by blessing us because we yield our hearts to him. That is when God gets the greatest glory and we get the greatest benefit. God is a win-win kind of God. These other kings, they get the greatest glory when you are miserable, when you see no way out. That's when they got you. So when we choose to do what we want, we simply trade one king, God, for another. And if you don't believe this, open your eyes. Look around. You know this is true instinctively. How many of us are slaves to some of the things on that list, and there's even more? It's because of the choices we make. So in closing, I want to read to you what Joshua said at the end of Joshua before he died. He's talking to a people. Now think about this. Even though he's talking to a people that have been dead for thousands of years, he's still talking to you and me because their history is our history. The things God did for them, he does for us. And the promises of then are the same now as they were then because God does not change. When he says something, it comes true. And so here's what Joshua says, Joshua 24. He says, Then Joshua summoned all the tribes of Israel to Shechem, including their elders, leaders, judges, and officers. So they came and presented themselves to God. So everybody, all of Israel. And Joshua says to the people, This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. So this is God speaking through Joshua. Long ago, your ancestors, including Terah, the father of Abraham, and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates River, and they worshipped other gods. So this is long ago. But I took your ancestor Abraham from the land beyond the Euphrates and led him into the land of Canaan, and I gave him many descendants through his son Isaac. To Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. To Esau I gave the mountains of Seir, while Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. Then I sent Moses and Aaron. I brought terrible plagues on Egypt, and afterward I brought you out as free people. But when your ancestors arrived at the Red Sea, the Egyptians chased after you with chariots and charioteers. And when your ancestors cried out to the Lord, I put darkness between you and the Egyptians, and I brought the sea crashing down on the Egyptians, drowning them. With your very own eyes, you saw what I did. Then you lived in the wilderness for many years. And finally, I brought you into the land of the Amorites on the east side of the Jordan. They fought against you, but I destroyed them before you. I gave you victory over them, and you took possession of their land. Then Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab, started a war against Israel. He summoned Balaam and the son of Beor, some names, to curse you, but I would not listen to him. Instead, I made this guy bless you. And so I rescued you from Balak. When you crossed the Jordan and came to Jericho, the men of Jericho fought against you as the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, Hittites, and Girgashites, and Hivites, and the Jebusites. But I gave you victory over them. And I sent terror ahead of you to drive out the two kings of the Amorites. It was not your swords or bows that brought the victory. I gave you the land you had not worked on. I gave you the towns you did not build, the towns where you were not living. I gave you vineyards and olive groves for food, though you did not plant them. So this is God basically saying, look at all of this that I have done for you. And now Joshua is speaking, and he says, So fear the Lord and serve him wholeheartedly. Why? Because of all the stuff I just mentioned. Put away forever the idols of your ancestors worshipped when they lived beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt. Serve the Lord alone. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, I love that. If serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve. Would you prefer the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates who didn't do anything for you? Or will it be the gods of the Amorites in whose land you're living now who don't do anything for you? Then Joshua says, But as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. Friends, do not fool yourselves. Do not fool yourselves. There is a choice to be made. You can't just be neutral on this. You can't. Because inevitably, if you're doing things your own way, you're not doing things God's way. And my prayer is for you is that you don't leave here today clinging to the little kings. All they want to do is hold you captive. I ask you to embrace the Creator King. He's not like those little kings. He actually loves you. He wants what is best for you. And He even gives you freedom to say no. Jesus said in John chapter 10, He says, the thief, or the little kings, they come only to steal and kill and destroy. But I, Jesus, have come that you may have life and have it to the full, or have it abundantly. This is why I came. Does that sound like an oppressive dictator to you? Does that sound like Him trying to keep all the fun stuff away from you? No. In Matthew 11, Jesus also says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. And you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now a yoke, in case you don't know, is a big wooden, it's how they harnessed oxen to plow the fields. It'd be this wooden thing that went over the shoulders of two oxen, and then they would harness it, and that's how they would be able to pull. Now, the yoke here, that Jesus, if you look in the Greek, He's not saying that my yoke is necessarily easy, but specifically that it's fitted just for you. Because if you did a one-size-fits-all kind of yoke for the oxen, basically it would kind of rub, and they develop sores and things. You've probably worn something like that was like not custom fit to you, or like a backpack, you're going camping or something, and it just kind of rubs on you because it's not designed to fit you specifically. But Jesus is saying, my yoke, my guidance, my leadership, my plan for you is custom fit. It's designed uniquely for you so that it won't wear on you. It won't rub you the wrong way. You'll enjoy doing it. And not only that, the burden is light. So which king will you serve? Which king will I serve? Because guess what? You will be serving some kind of a king. We're not autonomous. We all know this. We don't rule our own destinies, so somebody or something does. And it's up to us which one it is. And did you notice who did all the work in the speech by Joshua? Did you notice? Did you notice how arduous and difficult he described the times the Israelites had and how hard it was and everything was horrible? No, it was God did. God did. God did. I fought the battles for you. I parted the sea for you. I defeated the Egyptians for you. I put fear in the hearts of your enemies. God did. God did. That's because this, again, is a story about Him and what He has done and what He is doing for us. And there's this great scripture, I read it this morning. It's from 2 Thessalonians 1:11, and this really stuck out to me as I was reading it just recently. It says, this is Paul talking to the Thessalonians. He says, so we keep on praying for you, asking for God to enable you to live a life worthy of His call. May He give you the power to accomplish all the good things your faith prompts you to do. Now a lot of times if you're reading toward the end of a chapter, especially one of Paul's letters, it's kind of the final greeting, and it's easy to kind of gloss over that. He's like, yeah, I'm saying bye, I'm going to pray for you, that kind of thing. But look at what he's praying for. He's not praying, I pray that you will be able to hold up your end of the bargain. I pray that you will somehow find the strength to do all these arduous, horrible things that God tells you to do, and what's yet, you have to kind of figure it out. He's saying, he's speaking, he's saying, look, I pray that God will enable you. I pray that God will give you the power. I pray that God will prompt you. How awesome is that? He asks us to choose Him, but He does all the work. Can you find a better deal than that anywhere else? The only thing he wants from you and from me is our yielded heart. That's it. And he takes care of the rest. He tells us what to do, and then he enables us and gives us the power to do it. He fights our battles for us. He provides all we need. And the ultimate display of that kind of love was what his son did. Because love is not a gushy feeling. It's not just, I love you, and you feel the flutters. Love is a thing that we do. It's an action. It's a verb. And God demonstrated his love for us by paying the price that we could not pay. Again, he's doing it for us. So stop trying to do things your own way. Why would you want to keep going down that path? So what will you choose? If the serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, the Lord who wants to give you hope and a future, to give you rest, to give you life to the full, if serving that kind of God seems undesirable to you, then choose who you will serve. And it will be the little kings. The choice is yours. Let me pray with you. Father, what an awesome and mighty God you are. It just amazes me, and I just pray so much that the people in this room and those who listen online will grasp that ending part where the story's about you, and you do it all for us. You give us a hope, and you give us a future, and you give us power, and you enable us. If we would just yield our hearts to you, if we would just quit trying to do things our own way, you would show us a life we can never imagine doing things our way. Father, today I just pray that for each person here, that they would just commit this to you in their hearts. That they would walk away from here today not the same as when they walked in. That next week when they come back, they're not suffering from the same little kings. I pray for your deliverance, Lord. We have disobeyed you. We have been taken captive. And I ask each of you in your own hearts, as if you are a Christ follower, I pray that I ask that you just say this to God, like, God, I have been stupid. I have tried to do things my way. I've copied everything else, and it's taken me captive. I ask you to deliver me, and I trust that you will. Show me what it is you want me to do, because I not only know that you will show me, but you will give me the power, enable me to actually do what you ask me to do. Now today, if you have never accepted the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, I want to invite you to take part in that, because that's the ultimate yielding of your heart. Is recognizing that you've messed up. I've messed up. We've all done things that even you know are wrong, much less whatever the Bible says. You don't even live up to your own standards, but there's a God who loves you, who says, you know what? You are accountable for those things, but I am going to pay the price for you by sending my own son to die for you. But he's not going to stay dead. He's going to come back to life so that you can come back to life. And if you want that forgiveness today, then say this little prayer quietly, but mean it. And if you want to talk with me or someone else afterward, you absolutely can. We have a fresh start thing right outside the doorway. If you have questions about this, we'll be more than happy to talk it over with you. But if you're ready right now, I'd ask you to just repeat this prayer after me. Say, Jesus, I know that I have done wrong. It may not be a lot, or maybe it is, but I have done wrong, and I know that I can't pay this price on my own. But I believe that you came to earth. I believe that you lived a perfect life, and that you died in my place so that you could forgive me. And I accept your forgiveness, and I also know that you rose from the dead to prove that you are God, and I am trusting in you to forgive my sins and save my soul, because I cannot do it on my own. In Jesus' name, amen.